Welcome to the Level Up Artist Podcast. We're your hosts, Adriana Amay and
Jackie Sanders. We are two art professionals sharing forward the advice and business lessons we have learned along our creative journeys.
we talk to artists, leaders, and art professionals to demystify the creative process and discover new ways to succeed as a career-minded artist.
If you find value in these conversations, please go ahead and subscribe. This will help other creatives like you find our podcast, and you will be notified when we drop a new episode.
So on today's episode, we're really excited to have muralist Natalie Robinson. Welcome, Natalie.
Hello, hey, thank you so much for having me.
Yes, we're so excited to talk to you today, discuss your artistic journey, your creative process, and of course, your mural business. But real quick, before we dive in, let's go ahead and share a little bit more about your background for our listeners who may not be familiar with your work just yet.
So Natalie Robinson is a North Carolina-based full-time traveling muralist passionate about transforming public spaces into vibrant stories that captivate, inspire, and connect communities. Natalie has had the privilege of working with renowned brands, including Amazon, Nike, Champion, Duke University, and the ACC Men's Basketball Tournament. Her projects span across commercial and residential spaces nationwide, and her work has been showcased in New York City, Miami, Buenos Aires, Argentina, among others. In addition, Natalie has had the rewarding experience of organizing and leading community-driven mural projects where participants come together to leave their own creative mark. We love that.
And of course, that's a very formal introduction for our listeners, full of lots of big names. But Natalie, how would you describe the work that you do to someone who has never seen it before?
I would definitely say my work, first and foremost, is very versatile. It's kind of a mix between kind of that playful, illustrative style, but I also love taking on the challenge of doing like realism slash naturalism. But I would say like overall, my work is very vibrant, very playful. Like I'm gonna emphasize a lot this idea of play, and just that idea of like connecting into that inner child again. But yeah, I would definitely say like every project is super different, and so my work just varies. I mean, that's honestly the honest answer.
No, that's perfect. Now, Natalie, you've built a career as a full-time traveling muralist. Let's dive into that a little bit. What inspired you to navigate this path?
Okay, so I'm gonna give you the cliche answer at first. I've wanted to be an artist since I was like 6 years old. There's literally a voice recording of me at that age being like, I'm gonna be not a muralist, but I'm going to be an artist. So it's so cool to kind of look back and realize that I never did lose that, again, bringing in that term again, that inner child. From a muralist perspective or slash public art, I honestly, if you would have asked me like a couple years ago while I was still in school, like, did I ever see myself doing murals full time? The answer would have probably been no. But I just found the street art scene so inspiring that everything is so accessible and in one place, and art is for everyone. And I love that idea that you could literally walk outside and find that art. And I think it does shape our everyday lives in a very different way. So I kind of got drawn to that scene. Also, the fact too that like I am surrounded in nature, and like when you are working outdoors, like I love that I get to be outdoors. Like that's something that really fuels me. So that's really nice. And yeah, I kind of just stumbled upon it. I mean, I think you're gonna have a lot of artists who say like, I didn't really see myself doing particularly this, but I believe like every creative path will find you in some way, shape, or form. So I think like murals is just kind of what checked all the boxes for me. And yeah, it turned into a huge passion of mine, like aside from just being in the art like slash creative scene.
Nice. When did you actually get started? When was your first one? Were you still in college when you did it?
So actually no. So I will dive into this just a little bit. I do think something that really impacted me too of kind of being this muralist is when I took a semester off from college. So when COVID hit, art was no longer hands-on, because everything was just a lot just
Mess.
messy. Yeah. I actually went home for 6 months and I kind of just dived in and like started networking with different artists, worked with different muralists. I actually like kind of apprenticed under another muralist in Charlotte. Her name was Irisol Gonzalez. Phenomenal. She went off to Yale. She's amazing, but like we still keep in touch since. And I ended up painting my first mural at, I think I was 20. So wait, that's like 3 years ago. And it was a one day project, and that's like literally all I had to do it. And this was my first time doing a mural, and it was for one of the columns in Spirit Square of Charlotte, where like all the Broadway performances used to happen. And it was actually given to another one of my artist friends. His name's Mike Worth. He's a local Charlotte artist over there, and he sent me this message on Instagram that was like, "Hey Mike, like I know this is really last minute, but can you do this project?" So I messaged him. I was like, "I don't think you meant to send this to me or something like." And he was like, "No." He's like, "I did." He was like, "I can't do this." He's like, "Do you want it?" And I was like, "Heck yeah." And I had no idea what I was doing, but didn't eat, didn't sleep, as all artists will say. And we got it done, but it was literally a day turnaround. So it was something I've never done before. I've only kind of watched and learned through that. And then finally being able to do it hands on, I was like, oh yeah, that was like another kickstart to like, this is what I want to do. And just for how it connected with the community and how people will like look at it, want to take photos, like, it's truly something amazing when art can inspire those too. So like that was really cool. That was a really cool experience for me. Shout out to Mike for, getting that going. But yeah, that was a big pivotal point, I would say. I don't know if I actually answered your question. I'm not gonna lie, but
It did,
um
you did. Yeah, because I was curious when you first did it, but that makes a lot of sense. I mean, I think that speaks to that idea of how many, friendly muralists that we're surrounded with that will like tap another artist on the shoulder and be like, "Hey, do you want to come along? Like, I need an extra pair of hands, or whatever I need a break. Let's catch up." I've done that myself. I'm sure Jackie has too. Like that idea of like you just have people come over. And I don't know about you, but I find like I have a great time when I can have other creatives help me in a project. So you getting bit by the muralist bug is no surprise if you did it, already with somebody else that maybe was a little bit farther ahead, but can show you the ropes, essentially. That's awesome.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, and you mentioned earlier about with your personal art style, like reconnecting with your inner child. How do you feel like that kind of philosophy or mindset with your work guides your creative process and the choices you make?
I think it's definitely the focal center.
Mhm.
And it's not in the ways you think. Like, yes, from a visual look perspective, it is very colorful and it is very like, okay, this is not black and white, and you will never see me doing black and white. But it's just not how I see the world. But from a honestly like a deeper and more intentional reason, it is just kind of fulfilling that passion, and doing what I love every single day and being excited to wake up and do that thing. And then when the day ends, it's kind of like, I'm excited to do it again, but it's not this like I'm lugging it, it's not what I like to say, not being on autopilot. Like I really find enjoyment in this craft, and I enjoy the challenges too that come with it. And this is really where it like hits home for me when I say that is always be learning, like always stay a learner. Like there are so many things that you can learn out there, like whether it is about your craft or like how to prep or what, like there's so many different elements that go into each project, and each project is totally different and each client is totally different. So who you meet, what you work on, that's all going to vary, and I think that all shapes kind of your approach into how you do these projects. So when I say like, kind of stay that childlike self, it's kind of like stay curious, stay imaginative, always ask questions, always keep learning, because that learning never stops, and And I don't view it as that. So yeah, so it shapes a lot of my work, and just whenever I want to be like, I don't know if I can do this, it's like that kid in me is like, don't doubt yourself. Like you got this. Believe in yourself. And I think that that speaks more volumes when you can have that inner voice than anybody else telling you, you know? So
I absolutely agree. That was a very wonderful answer for that. One phrase that I really adopted early on is kind of similar in my art journey was it's kind of become like a mantra in my business is like actively choose the future you are creating to
I
where I think oftentimes, especially when it comes to like corporate jobs, it's so easy just to like complain about the grind, or even as an entrepreneur, it's like we all have a million reasons to complain about something, right? But knowing that, okay, no, I am actively choosing this lifestyle, I'm actively choosing this project, I'm actively choosing this thing because I am confident and secure in the vision that I am bringing to life.
I
Um,
love that. Can you send that to me after this
I
episode?
will.
I have like a whole quote book that I keep
Ah,
just when people say things
yes.
that just like hit home. And like I relate to that too because, it's kind of going back to that autopilot like mindset. Like I always try to
Right.
be a prisoner in your own mind. Like you
Yes.
have the power to make your own choices. And this idea of manifestation, right? Like which we all hit on, like I do believe that's real. Like if you see things through, they will be, you know?
Yeah. So true. Better yet, I have a coffee mug with it printed on it, so I'll send you one.
Very nice.
I love it.
Absolutely love that. Yeah, I love that idea too. And the clarity in which you're expressing this, and, for all our listeners, it's like we've also shared that idea of figuring out what your focus is, what your goals are, and then any opportunity that presents itself, you can just go, does this get me closer to the mountain or does this get me farther from the mountain? And having that clarity definitely helps out. Like, yes, still being willing to explore, but also knowing where you're headed instead of just drifting. So I love that your inner child is assertive, to be honest with you. When we talk about this with folks, some inner child is just like, experiment with everything and that's it, but not with that clear direction. And I love that your inner child does have a clear direction, which is awesome. And I think that's something I want to make sure that I pointed out for our listeners. Now, Natalie, you've worked with major brands like Amazon, Nike, Duke University. Can you share what it's like collaborating with such well-known brands?
Okay, so it's funny because I do get this question sometimes, and like I don't mean to be crass when I say this, but like at the end of the day, like people are people, like, and I think that's really important to hit on though, because I think sometimes when you are working with high-end clients, which I mean they are, you can't let yourself like become lower in the situation of that. Like you still have to have the same amount of respect for that person, and that person has to have the same amount of respect for you, and not just you as a person, but you in your work. And that is the other point to it. It's always going to be tied to that. So for me, I view it as any other client. It's a person who has feelings, who wants good communication, professionalism, wants you to be on time. Those are all the things that you should emphasize on what makes you you. But at the end of the day, you want to not lose that just because you're in the eyes of higher ups, let's just say, and I think that once you establish that that feeling is mutual, it just makes the relationship itself again a relationship and not just a transaction, not just, oh, I have this name under my belt. Because for me it's like I could care less about that if that person is disrespecting me or not treating me the way I should be. And a lot of the times too, I've had my experiences when I was first starting where like folks would be inspired by my portfolio and what I've done, but they, tap into my age a little bit and be like, I don't know, So that too is like something that you just kind of have to let go of, and just at the end of the day, like, do you want to work with these people or do you not? Because, like, again, going back to this idea of choosing, you're also making those choices too. as much as they want to invest in you, do you want to invest in them? And I think if you hear that out loud, sometimes people might say, well, that kind of sounds conceited, but it really just keeps everything on one playing field to say, like, we all bleed red. Like, it doesn't matter who you work with. You want to be true to yourself. You want to have a good work ethic, but you don't want to limit yourself and belittle yourself because someone's got a name attached to them.
That makes sense. And also exposure bucks don't pay bills. So I love
Exactly.
that idea, like treating the clients the same, mom and pop shop or, big brands, presenting yourself as a professional. After all, they're coming to you or you're going to them, for a service, right? As opposed to like they're not doing you any favors. And if it's not
Sure.
a good fit, you should walk away. So, no,
Exactly.
that's great advice.
Yeah, and kind of speaking of big brands and big names, also big places like New York and Miami and Buenos Aires, your murals have been showcased in a range of different spaces. How do you feel like those different environments influence the work that you make?
That's a great question too. And honestly, I'm gonna kind of approach it the same way I would when it comes to people. Like every project is different, and break it down even from that, every wall is different. So you might see something with a wall, and you're like, you could view this pipe on the wall as like, this is going to be a problem. This is going to be disgusting to manage, or you could incorporate it with the work and make it flow. And there's something beautiful about that when you can take the industrialized space and make it into something extraordinary. So I approach it kind of the same way. Like, of course, place has value in terms of like, am I working with community members and like creating that local recognition that's going to be on the wall for something to people enjoy in that way. But I think just from a breaking down standpoint, I think just approaching every project as like, I have no idea what I'm doing and I'm going to figure it out, because that sometimes is the case, and you can't rely on equipment all the time. You can plan for everything except weather, so it's kind of just again viewing everything almost as the same in that way too. Like it doesn't matter if you're in Miami or you're in North Carolina. It's one of those things where you just got to approach every project like, I'm still learning, I'm still figuring this out, I'm going to figure this out, I'm going to see this through, and what does this wall have and the environment around it that I can make feel different from each piece. And that kind of ties into the idea of like why my work is kind of in that versatile stage, because I love exploring new styles and I love that idea of play and experimenting. So I'm going to say that word again, but play, and that plays a huge role from an environmental standpoint. So yeah, I would definitely say that's probably my answer.
I love that. And that makes so much sense too, because yes, you can try to embrace the local culture, as you were saying, or especially if there's a specific type of, I mean, very literally like flower or tree that's nearby, making sure that the flowers you include are native to that area. But I think also to your point, every client's like a brand new project. Even this, I think the second you think that, okay, perfect, I got it figured out, we're just gonna like crank out all these projects, then there's a thunderstorm during a project, or oh, I got the wrong kind of lift, or this or that. Like there's always every new job teaches you something. But I
And
am curious in
oh,
addition
yes,
to
go
this,
ahead. Sorry.
what was that?
Oh, no, I was just gonna say, like, to kind of piggyback off of like what you said too, is, I don't know if this is kind of a hot take, but also at the end of the day, I still feel like artists have that creative freedom to create, what that design will kind of be in the end. Like, of course, you're going to get feedback from your client, but that client is the one who's paying you. You know what I mean? So they have to have some say. And that is the professional side of things or the entrepreneurial side of things where, like, it's a give and take, right? But, like, how much are you giving? Like, you got to find that balance, right? But I think it's important to remember that at the end of the day, like sometimes, yes, the work is commissioned work, and sometimes they do want to throw in, the skyline or whatever. But I always try to approach it in such a way of like, how can I make this feel different from every skyline that you've seen? Like, how can I add my own spin on that? So again, it's that give and take, and it's finding that balance between the client who is ultimately your bread and butter, but also you who wants to have your own creative flow at the end of the day. So I felt like that kind of related to kind of what you said of, you know, you're going to have that local parts of you, but that you're going to have to include into each project, but ultimately you're creating for yourself too. So it's kind of that blend that I think still makes every piece of work very different and unique in its own way.
Yeah, absolutely. That's so, so true. And now real quick for those murals that we talked about, like with New York and Miami, I am curious for those. You mentioned obviously being commission clients. How did you get each of those jobs, of course, in all different parts of the country? Were they open calls? Were they mural festivals? Were they people that found you online? What type of projects were those?
Okay, so this is gonna go down a little bit of a rabbit hole.
We're ready. Let's jump in.
Yeah. So my goal from the very start, once I was like, okay, like I know I want to do murals, like I know I want to be in this public art scene, was I don't want to be just in one place. Like, it's like when people ask you, like, where do you reside? I'm like, kind of everywhere all at once, you know? Because for me, it's like that's where I want to be. I don't want to just create my work in one place. I want it to live everywhere. So, and that's hard to do, obviously, to get like the travel component under your belt. It's an extra additional cost, and like, how are you going to meet those certain people? You're going to a place you've never been, right? So, there's a lot of the unknowns. So when you're talking about the New York and Miami specifically, those actually were not commissions. So the New York project, to make a very long story short, I was invited by a creative friend of mine to go to New York for the Bushwick Collective Mural Festival. And I was going to be assisting professional local muralist Osiris Rain,
Oh,
and he ended up
Cyrus is
phenomenal, right? So Osiris ended up getting COVID, had to leave. So this was during when like things were kind of coming out of the water, but they were still kind of like murky. And I was like, okay, I was there. And when I say the other creative friend, his name's Brandon Sides, but he used to run a print shop business that's no longer. But anyways, that's why it's like the title to that is kind of sometimes question mark. But so anyways, so he originally invited me, right? But he was like, hey, so he had to leave, so hang out, network, why not? And I was like, I'm gonna get a wall. And then he was like, really? And I
already
was like,
here.
yeah. And so literally all I did, knock on doors. Like, hey, I'm an artist from North Carolina. Here's some of my work. Boom, boom, boom. And I didn't have like that much under my belt, but I had enough to be like I can do this. And I think too, like the way in which I approach people, it's kind of um like I don't question it. So yeah, and then I found this transmission auto shop, and they were like, yeah, come deck out our front. And I was like, okay, cool. My first time using spray paint. So that was a bit of like a, huh? But like looking at it now, I'm like, oh, those lines are so garbage. But it's so fun because in the moment after you're done, you're like, heck yeah, I did that. And then like now you're like, but it's cool because for somewhere like New York being a place where there's graffiti all over and things get covered in the matter of hours, it's still writing to this day. So that is truly really cool to me. And the fact that people like want it up for so long. And the piece itself was about like not getting caught in a rut. So again, like unplugging our brains from the autopilot. So it's kind of coming full circle, but from the autopilot world and tapping into our creativity. So super cool. Anyways, I know that was a really long explanation, but the second project, I was contacted by Sergio. He's a wonderful artist. His Instagram is registered artist. He lives out in Florida. I'll send you his contact and stuff so you can include him on the thread or whatever. But he actually reached out to me because he organizes a project called AWOLs, which basically you go to different schools in Miami where their creativity is not as accessible, and he's got 30 artists and up from all over the world to come deck out the school. And it's a nonprofit, so it's really cool because all these artists are donating essentially their time and their talents and coming from all parts of the globe. Like we're talking Netherlands, we're talking Peru, we're talking Mexico. I mean, you name it, New York, Detroit, like everywhere. And not only is that a really cool networking experience, but it also gives you a chance to do a wall in a place you've never been. So I say all this to say, don't be so worried from will this person actually like my work and everything like that. I would just say, like, if you can get something up wherever you are, like that creates, I would go back to the word, that exposure for you, because your clients that you are getting your bread and butter from are now going to look at you and be like, oh, you've been everywhere. And half the time they don't ask you, was this paid? Or they don't ask you what you got paid for this. They just see the work itself and go, oh, you were in Miami. Oh, you were here. And I think that is something I want to emphasize too, is just just try to do as much outreach as you can, because you just never know where you'll end up and who will see your work. And you never know if you're in another country, let's say, and you're working on a wall and nobody's asking you again, are you getting paid for this or not? Who's going to walk by and be like, hey, I have this wall and everything, like, what would you charge for this? And like, that is the entrepreneurial side of you coming out, because you are networking at the same time you're working, or we'll just say working, however you define it. And I think that's super cool. So that is definitely something I want to emphasize, that some of those things were not paid. But it was a good chance to network and be part of this community, and knowing other people were doing it too. So it's like, at the end of the day, like, oh, did I sell myself as an artist? But like, the impact you make in these places is beyond that. So yeah.
Yeah.
So
No,
long,
perfect answer.
long explanation.
No, but that's actually good because it gives people context and it also establishes the idea, at least when we're starting out, right? That it doesn't have to be this big 5-figure job where I won't take it. It's like, okay, when you're starting out, as long as it feels right and it aligns with your goals, then it's okay, to sometimes make some sacrifices, if it's in alignment with what we're trying to accomplish. So no, that's not bad at all. That was awesome. Speaking of course, it is a business, but there's also like this idea of trying to blend creativity into it, right? And you kind of touched on that a little bit earlier, but I do want to ask you, what advice would you give to artists, regardless of their age, regardless of if they've been an artist a long time or they're curious, doesn't matter, whatever they're coming from, but if they want to turn, you know, be murals, right, as a sustainable career, what advice would you give them?
Okay, so I am a sucker for the creative entrepreneur questions because I mean, that is something that, from a business perspective, it is amazing to be your own boss and to have that flexibility. And again, going back to the word choosing who you work with and what, projects you pass up. So I would say the first piece of advice I would give really anyone, but let's just say artists specifically, be you. Be true to who you are. Again, do not lose that, because that is what makes you the artist. That is what makes you your most authentic self, because you are not shape shifting to fit the mold of the trend or the this or the that. You're creating work that resonates with you, you are being true to who you are. If that personality is super goofy and carefree, keep being that, and like we're going back to age, doesn't matter how old you get, like you have that childlike spirit, you have that young energy, let's just say. So I think that's really important. And I think that can shape a lot of the way, not only that you approach projects, you approach people, um, because you want there to be that genuine connection. I think that's really important. You want someone to be like, wow, you're really raw and real, you know? Don't be a copy. Like there's only one of you. Like that is something I think artists specifically have to own, and not try to be in the box. Be outside the box, because that's what us artists are supposed to do. So, second piece of advice I would definitely say is believe in yourself, see it through. Like you just got to start, you just got to jump in. You just got to know it's all going to work out in the end. And even if you're a bit delusional, there's no such thing. No such thing as being too positive, being too optimistic. I really believe that. I really believe that, you're going to have other people who are going to try and tear you down. I've had it throughout my career. But, it makes you stronger. It shapes the way your self love comes through and the way you view others comes through. Again, like keeping everyone on that same playing field. So I think believing in yourself when no one else does, that's a power hold, and that makes you very confident. And whether you don't feel confident, you're taking on things that, most people would say you're pretty confident with it. And, sometimes it is a little bit about faking it till you make it in some ways. And, because the thing is like, if you are nervous and scared, like that's totally okay. That's valid. But, how you let that be your attitude towards the opportunity you may have, I think it's better to look back in my life and be like, I did that. It wasn't the greatest, but I learned something through it versus I didn't try at all. Like that would be my biggest fear is like I didn't take the risk, not that I took it. So I think that is the other piece I would definitely give is like you just got to start and you just got to let it snowball because it will. And you get from the universe as much as you put in. So if you know you're only giving 20%, you're going to only get 20%. I mean, life is a game of a lot of no's before there's a yes. And I think knowing that too going in, like, don't expect it to happen overnight. It takes time. It takes a lot of even putting in like 25% effort every single day in some way, shape, or form, whether that's outreach emails, whether that's applying to calls, all those RFPs, RFQs, whatever it is, you got to put in the work. So don't think it falls from the sky because it really doesn't. But and that's the truthful, part of things. But I think also too, just knowing that whatever downs you're in, it's only temporary, and you're gonna come out on the other side.
Nice.
Absolutely love it. I absolutely love it. And now, kind of connected, it may be similar to those answers, which is very inspiring. But one of your mottos that you say is to create, inspire, repeat. So, how do you feel like that philosophy shapes the way that you work and connect with others and inspire them?
So to be quite honest, it is pretty literal. There's not really anything super deep behind that. It definitely is something that I believe I've kind of just resonated with as a kid, and it's kind of this motto I've always created, like in my own brain. So it kind of just made sense to stick with me as kind of like if I could describe my overall mission to others, it would be create, inspire, repeat. And that is simply keep tapping into your creativity. So yes, it does kind of embody all of what we're talking about, but tap into your creativity, keep creating, keep experimenting, keep playing. Like play is a very, very big key word that I will emphasize over and over again. And then let that work live, and let it speak when you can't. Let the art speak for itself and let it inspire others. Let it inspire others not only to do their own projects, but to even ask questions, to, want to, like, I don't know, collect photographs of all the murals they see that are super cool. Like, you just never know whose hands it's going to fall in and what it's going to mean to someone. Like, I've literally had someone come over to me that was I mean, it's kind of like one of those moments, like, what do you say? But like when I was painting in murals, someone said to me, like, you have no idea how much I needed to see like this specifically. And I'm thinking, like, what exact, like, just this kind of art, like that you don't see. And like, I mean, he was, let's just say, very down. And that was very eye-opening, to always think like, because I think as artists too, we get very caught in like, how is our work being perceived? Like, do people actually think it's good? Do people think my illustrative, playful characters are. And it's like, tune all of that out. Tune the outside world out. Like, what does it mean to you? And some people may think that sounds conceited in a way, but the truth is you're blocking out all that outside noise because there will always be that. There will always be critics. Be the biggest critic in yourself. Push yourself, right? And that's the only person you're competing against. How can I be better than the person I was the day before? In all shapes and aspects, right? Not even with the art, but like even how I communicate with those people. Did I have my headphones in while I was painting, or did I take them off, interact with the folks who were looking? Because you never know if that could get you your next gig from the bread and butter aspect, but you never know what kind of relationship you can establish too. So create, inspire, repeat is kind of just that. Like, keep creating, keep playing, keep inspiring others. You never know who it's going to touch. And then how can those efforts be repeated? Meaning, like, how can you paint it forward? How can you pull others up? And how can those people who then got inspired from you keep doing the same? So it's kind of just this cycle. And that's why repeat is really like emphasized in that, because I think the world is always going to keep turning, and there's always going to be noise, and it's always going to feel heavy sometimes and feel like it's black and white, but it's not. And I think trying to tap into those areas where it's not all those things that you may read and see is really what's important.
Love it. Oh, love all of it. There was so much gold in there. Natalie, what is a dream project or collaboration you love to take on in the future? Whether you're knocking on their door or they're knocking on yours, but what's a dream project or collaboration?
Sure. So I'm gonna actually keep this one pretty brief. For just like now thinking of where my work fits into certain spaces. So I would really love to collaborate with like parks and recreation centers. I'd love to deck out an entire basketball court. Oh, that would be a dream. Like, just to have the aerial views, it's super playful, super colorful, completely transforms the park. That would be awesome. So definitely organizations that can implement projects like that, perfect. Hospitals and medical centers, I think too, again, going back to this idea of like the world being heavy and feeling that way, and especially in those kinds of settings where sometimes you receive good news, sometimes not so much, like having that inspiration be in those places where it's not super accessible because everything is kind of very much not literally black and white, but there's not a whole lot of color. So I think, putting my work into those spaces. Um, I would also love to do, projects for like music festivals. That's been like top on my list too. Like, I could just really see my work being like super energetic and dynamic, and doing the whole photo op thing. And lastly, I would really love to work with a project developer on like decking out a whole side of a apartment condo building and just really, yeah, really transforming that. So a lot of these are more like kind of niche things, but also kind of vague things. So nothing like specific, like, oh, I would love to collaborate with like Sabrina Carpenter on, you know, um, I'm not thinking that direction quite yet. But just like in terms of like a space mindset and the community members that I want to connect with, like definitely those areas would be ideal.
I love that. And now, if someone is listening, and feels inspired to start painting murals, what one piece of advice would you give them?
I mean, honestly, it goes back to the same thing. Like, just start. Like, you're gonna feel intimidated. You're gonna feel like you don't know what you're doing. And the truth is, most people will lie to your face and say they do, but nobody knows what they're doing. And once you think you've got it all figured out, you've lost, because again, it goes back to just keep learning and keep knowing in the end that like taking risks will make you grow, and when we grow when we're most uncomfortable. So I think if you're scared, that's good, and if you're scared and you do it, that's even better, so I think, yeah, be scared, but do it anyways. Be scared and do it anyways.
Yeah, I heard it on another podcast once, and I love it and it ties into what you just said. But basically, the quote goes, discomfort is the currency of growth. And I was just like, oh,
Ooh, I
yeah,
like that.
yeah,
Water's
yeah.
flowing.
It's like,
Yeah, that's
yeah, it's
very
the currency. You have to go through it. If you're too comfortable, you're stuck.
water's, yeah, totally. Huh.
Yeah, got to make some ripples. Well, next up, we love to ask all our guests, Natalie, how they define success. But first, we're going to put in a quick word from our sponsors.
This episode is brought to you by our Level Up Artist resources.
We understand that life as a modern artist can be both exciting and overwhelming. Plus, there's a lot of information out there, but what do visual artists actually need?
We've spent countless hours of trial and error, weeding through tons of information to find the gold so that you don't have to waste time going down those endless rabbit holes.
We created a library of PDF resources with bonus videos that cover everything from artist documents to exhibition prep, social media to technology, sales strategies, and artist mindset, several templates, and more.
Ready to get started? Head on over to levelupartist.com/shop to level up your creative career today.
Welcome back, everybody. So, a question we love to ask everybody, Natalie, is how do you define success as an artist?
Okay, yeah. So we're definitely gonna tie in all pieces we talked about into one. I think the two things, okay, honestly, I want to say as just like a blanket statement, how I would define success, period, is I think the greatest measure of success is how you treat other people. I think that just goes above and beyond. I think everybody thinks it's like, in my opinion, like thinks it's the occupation, thinks it's about what you do, where you travel to, how much money you have at the end of the day. I think it's like, did you smile at the stranger? Did you wave at them? Did you ask them how their day was going? Were you tapped into everybody else without yourself in it? You know what I mean? Like, because I think we can get really caught up in living in our own bubbles and thinking like the problems are only happening to me and this and this and this. And it's not until you actually, okay, take your deflated ego out and talk to someone else and realize they're going through the exact same thing. And I think you'll feel closer, you'll feel like you have a community, and again, you'll feel less alone. So I just say that as a blanket statement to say like that's how I would define success just in general. From an artist perspective, I think it goes back to everything I was kind of talking about. This idea of integrity, staying true to who you are, being truthful about yourself. Take out all the parts that aren't you to find you, like who are you hanging out with? Who's your tribe? Is this tribe actually benefiting you? And when I say benefiting you, I really mean like, what is the transaction here? Because every relationship is a transaction. So are they giving you things that you can't give yourself? Are you giving them their, piece of you in a healthy way? I think it's always important to reflect on your relationships and who you're surrounding yourself with, because that can shape a lot of you. So I think integrity is really important when it comes to yourself, for like being successful as an artist. And I think the other big word I would emphasize is definitely intention. Again, going back to this idea of like, where am I putting my work? Who do I like? What community I want to build, right? And pass up the projects that aren't you. And but also, if you're like, my mindset is say yes to everything, and I feel like that's where I'm at and that's where I'm exploring, then that's your intention, and that's okay. And I think, again, blocking out that noise to let everybody else decide what your intention is and what you're trying to do, let yourself establish that. And that's what's going to make you feel like your own artist, not just a artist. It's going to feel like you're the artist, and not that you're being molded. So I obviously think it's good to take advice from others, who are doing the same thing you're doing and to share those pieces of advice. But it's kind of like just one of those things like, what do you want to take with you at the end of the day? Because you don't have to take everything, you could take nothing. But I think, again, it's just establishing who you are and what you want to be like in this short life we have. So, yeah, integrity and intention for sure.
I love it. I love all those words. And I think that's great advice. And I know obviously you shared a lot of advice and insight on this podcast today. And some of those things may apply to our next question. But going back to before you even started, I guess before your first mural project, what is one piece of advice that you wish you had heard before you got started on your creative journey? Or maybe what is something that was surprising to you that you didn't expect?
So I'm gonna be kind of lame here. Sorry. Um, honestly, for me, like in a grand scheme on a deeper level of things, I believe the universe has timing for everything. So it's like, for me, it's like if I knew this piece of advice, would my life be different? Maybe, but I believe like my life is working out the way it's supposed to. So it's hard for me to be like, what would I would have done? Like I try to live with no regrets because at the end of the day, again, it's like I learned something. I didn't fail even though it might have felt like it, it's like I learned, and to kind of have that mindset shift. So, like what I would have told myself, I'll try to give you a more real answer. And I think the realest answer I could give you right now is just, don't quit. Like, life's a game sometimes of just not quitting, and I think it's important to emphasize that like there are going to be some hardships when you are trying to work for yourself, and not only that, trying to get the gigs you do and the people you meet, and they're going to be people who build you up and tear you down, and it's all the things, and it can feel overwhelming, but like how to manage that stress and like connect back with nature, because find the places where you feel most like your kid self again, who again remains that curiosity and imaginative kid who's just, so inspired. So I think definitely just like, not that I've had these moments where I'm like, I'm going to quit, but it's definitely been hard at times. So, right, of just having that mindset to be like, it's only temporary again. But yeah, I mean, honestly, my more real answer to that is like, I don't think I would have told myself anything. I think it's like I jumped in when I thought I was right. Whether it was right or wrong, who knows? It's just what I thought would have been. And I did learn things, and I'm continuing to learn things. So to tell myself something before that, I mean, it's like, would I have taken that advice? Would I have not? I don't know. It's hard to think about. I try to not think about the past too much. I think it's important to emphasize the past in terms of like, okay, like how I've grown, and like, I think we spend a lot of times as humans, and more importantly as artists, going, what am I not doing? Like, what
Mm.
come this person's doing this and I'm not doing this, versus emphasizing what have I done? What are the accomplishments I have had? And what has made me the artist I am? And I think like again, instilling that confidence in yourself to be like, I have come a long way, and to recognize the past as just that versus I could have done that, or I should have done that when that person did that. Like again, block out the noise. Like this is you in your life, and you decide with your intention how you spend it and that integrity that you hold to yourself. So I think it all just kind of ties
Oh,
together. Yeah.
yes, it does. Yes, it does. I like the positive go-getter attitude. Honestly, it's like what I keep hearing in all this. It's like just you'll figure it out. You'll be fine. Just keep going. Keep
Yeah.
plugging along. I
Yeah.
love that. And honestly, that's a super important something we've talked in other episodes and in other interviews too. It's like that idea, if you're a self-employed person, you need grit and you need determination and you need to be flexible and adaptable and you need to be assertive. And there are times you're not going to feel like any of those things, but those are some of the ingredients that will help you get through the tougher times and to enjoy the good times too. So I think you've shared a lot of that in here, which I love. Now, Natalie, random. If somebody were to randomly hand you $100 right now, what would you splurge on or invest in? It has to be something that brings you joy and is related to your art or business.
Yes. Okay. So if I had $100, hands down, I'm going to a used bookstore and I'm getting a bunch of children's books,
Oh,
old and the new. I will say the new children's books, like they have their things where I'm like, it's not the same as Rainbow Fish or the Dr. Seuss, but it's good to I actually use that as a lot of inspo for like color palettes and the way things move and how they are dynamic. So again, I mean, emphasizing this idea of play and kid-like atmosphere, like that is the section I head towards. It's not the, hey, let me, build my mental health or improve my diet. It's like, no, let me read like third grade level books and look at the pictures. Like that's it. That's my joy for $100 for sure.
I love
first
it.
person
Such
to
a good
answer
answer.
that one. Love it. It's awesome. You're feeding the inner child. I mean, you've mentioned it. It's like such a key part of who you are as an artist. So perfect.
Yeah. And I would also wanted to say one more thing on the previous question, just this idea of like being a freelancer too. Like, I think it's always important to recognize too that like with so much flexibility comes even greater discipline. And that is a hard thing to kind of lock in sometimes because you're gonna have people who are like, oh, you're freelance. You can do things whenever. Come hang out. Come dilly dally. Why not? And you'll always be tempted. And I don't say that as like, sometimes that's a good thing, right? Like I don't say that as a bad thing, but again, it's like setting those intentions, like where do I want to be? What goals do I have? And is this going to bring me closer or do I have to sacrifice that to do this? And so I think like just not even from an artist perspective, but a freelance perspective overall, I think that can sometimes become like blurred in the two because it's like I do have so much flexibility. So let me just, you know, I almost said F off and go, live wherever and do whatever and spend this money. And if that's your intention, that's one thing. But if that's not, and that is just something where you feel like you can do it, so I'm going to do it. Anybody can say that about any product they're buying. Like, I can buy this, $15 face mask, so why not? But like, what's the intention behind it? Because you really need it, or so I think creating that separation between flexibility and discipline is huge, huge.
Nice.
So, so true. And I feel like as entrepreneurs, you learn that every day. You learn, okay, by being way too disciplined, and you're like, well, I can be a little easier on myself. I don't need to be so rigid. And then you get a little too flexible and playful, and you're like, okay, I really need to hunker down and be disciplined. So it's a constant seesaw of it, but definitely a good reminder. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Now, Natalie, as we're wrapping up, what exciting projects do you have coming up that our listeners should know about?
Okay, so I'm going to be having a two-story wall project coming up in Wilmington. I can't say too much about it because it's a second location of another place, and we're kind of trying to keep the hush hush for the press and everything to build and all that. So that's all I'll mention about that. But that will be a super exciting project, super different in terms of a like style perspective. Definitely gonna be things to learn, but why not? And yeah, it's gonna be really cool.
Oh, I love that. Well, I definitely go to Wilmington a bunch in the summer, so we'll definitely have to be in touch of when you're working on it. I'll stop by. And real quick before we let you go with the rest of your day, how can our listeners stay in touch with you after they listen to today's episode?
Yes, so you can follow me on my Instagram. That is going to be Natalie Robinson _art, Natalie Robinson _art. And my website is www.natalierobinson.work. And if you're interested in more of like a, hey, I got a project, I want to bring it to life kind of thing, my email is Natalie, the number 9 rob@gmail.com.
Perfect. Well, we'll make sure to link all these things in the show notes. Thank you so much for being with us on the podcast today, Natalie.
Thank you so much for having me. This is fun.
Oh, I know. That's been awesome. Well, in the meantime, for our listeners, I want if you want to stay connected with us between episodes, share feedback, or have a question you would like for us to answer on the podcast, you can reach us through social media. I'm at May Art across all platforms.
And I'm at J Sanders Studio on all platforms. And if you want to follow the podcast, we are at Level Up Artist on Instagram. Thank you so much for listening. We'll talk to you in the next episode.